At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs 41% of the total population. The growing population needs food to sustain itself, and quality seed is the beginning of producing nutritious food. FSII members are engaged in research-based breeding applications and technologies to give farmers access to quality seeds. Members are driven by the fundamental values of respecting everyone's intellectual property rights and commitment to research. FSII members are leading the innovation through local in-house seed material as well as from overseas and adapting them to Indian conditions. Through seed research, seed commercialization, the members are working closely with Indian farmers to help them drive profits and bringing quality produce for consumers. FSII's prime focus is to help all stakeholders understand seed issues and consistently advocate the seed industry's position for the benefit of farmers and agriculture. Through international collaborations, FSII brings best practices and propagates them amongst members and farmers for successful adoption of technology and innovation. FSII and its member companies engage closely with farmers, rural communities, regulatory authorities, policymakers, scientific community, NGOs, and other diverse stakeholders to create an enabling environment for the farmers. To help achieve the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making India self-reliant, FSII is working tirelessly to create a favorable environment to enhance the nation's agriculture economy. FSII is focused on improving farmers and consumer quality of life through improved agriculture. Join FSII's journey to empower so that billions can benefit. At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs 41% of the total population. The growing population needs food to sustain itself, and quality seed is the beginning of producing nutritious food. FSII members are engaged in research-based breeding applications and technologies to give farmers access to quality seeds. Members are driven by the fundamental values of respecting everyone's intellectual property rights and commitment to research. FSII members are leading the innovation through local in-house seed material as well as from overseas and adapting them to Indian conditions. Through seed research, seed commercialization, the members are working closely with Indian farmers to help them drive profits and bringing quality produce for consumers. FSII's prime focus is to help all stakeholders understand seed issues and consistently advocate the seed industry's position for the benefit of farmers and agriculture. Through international collaborations, FSII brings best practices and propagates them amongst members and farmers for successful adoption of technology and innovation. FSII and its member companies engage closely with farmers, rural communities, regulatory authorities, policymakers, scientific community, NGOs, and other diverse stakeholders to create an enabling environment for the farmers. To help achieve the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making India self-reliant, FSII is working tirelessly to create a favorable environment to enhance the nation's agriculture economy. FSII is focused on improving farmers and consumer quality of life through improved agriculture. Join FSII's journey to empower India's millions of farmers so that billions can benefit. At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs 41% of the total population. The growing population needs food to sustain itself, and quality seed is the beginning of producing nutritious food. FSII members are engaged in research-based breeding applications and technologies to give farmers access to quality seeds. Members are driven by the fundamental values of respecting everyone's intellectual property rights and commitment to research. FSII members are leading the innovation through local in-house seed material as well as from overseas and adapting them to Indian conditions. Through seed research, seed commercialization, the members are working closely with Indian farmers to help them drive profits and bring in quality produce for consumers. FSII's prime focus is to help all stakeholders understand seed issues and consistently advocate the seed industry's position for the benefit of farmers and agriculture. Through international collaborations, FSII brings best practices and propagates them amongst members and farmers for successful adoption of technology and innovation. FSII and its member companies engage closely with farmers, rural communities, regulatory authorities, policymakers, scientific community, NGOs, and other diverse stakeholders to create an enabling environment for the farmers. To help achieve the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making India self-reliant, FSII is working tirelessly to create a favorable environment to enhance the nation's agriculture economy. FSII is focused on improving farmers and consumer quality of life through improved agriculture. Join FSII's journey to empower India's millions of farmers so that billions can benefit. At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs 41% of the total population. The growing population needs food to sustain itself, and quality seed is the beginning of producing nutritious food. FSII members are engaged in research-based breeding applications and technologies to give farmers access to quality seeds. Members are driven by the fundamental values of respecting everyone's intellectual property rights and commitment to research. FSII members are leading the innovation through local in-house seed material as well as from overseas and adapting them to Indian conditions. Through seed research, seed commercialization, the members are working closely with Indian farmers to help them drive profits and bring in quality produce for consumers. FSII's prime focus is to help all stakeholders understand seed issues and consistently advocate the seed industry's position for the benefit of farmers and agriculture. Through international collaborations, FSII brings best practices and propagates them amongst members and farmers for successful adoption of technology and innovation. FSII and its member companies engage closely with farmers, rural communities, regulatory authorities, policymakers, scientific community, NGOs, and other diverse stakeholders to create an enabling environment for the farmers. To help achieve the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making India self-reliant, FSII is working tirelessly to create a favorable environment to enhance the nation's agriculture economy. FSII is focused on improving farmers and consumer quality of life through improved agriculture. Join FSII's journey to empower India's millions of farmers so that billions can benefit. At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs 41% of the total population. The growing population needs food to sustain itself, and quality seed is the beginning of producing nutritious food. FSII members are engaged in research-based breeding applications and technologies to give farmers access to quality seeds. Members are driven by the fundamental values of respecting everyone's intellectual property rights and commitment to research. FSII members are leading the innovation through local in-house seed material as well as from overseas and adapting them to Indian conditions. Through seed research, seed commercialization, the members are working closely with Indian farmers to help them drive profits and bringing quality produce for consumers. FSII's prime focus is to help all stakeholders understand seed issues and consistently advocate the seed industry's position for the benefit of farmers and agriculture. Through international collaborations, FSII brings best practices and propagates them amongst members and farmers for successful adoption of technology and innovation. FSII and its member companies engage closely with farmers, rural communities, regulatory authorities, policymakers, scientific community, NGOs, and other diverse stakeholders to create an enabling environment for the farmers. To help achieve the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making India self-reliant, FSII is working tirelessly to create a favorable environment to enhance the nation's agriculture economy. FSII is focused on improving farmers and consumer quality of life through improved agriculture. Join FSII's journey to empower India's millions of farmers so that billions can benefit. At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs 41% of the total population. The growing population needs food to sustain itself, and quality seed is the beginning of producing nutritious food. FSII members are engaged in research-based breeding applications and technologies to give farmers access to quality seeds. Members are driven by the fundamental values of respecting everyone's intellectual property rights and commitment to research. FSII members are leading the innovation through local in-house seed material as well as from overseas and adapting them to Indian conditions. Through seed research, seed commercialization, the members are working closely with Indian farmers to help them drive profits and bringing quality produce for consumers. FSII's prime focus is to help all stakeholders understand seed issues and consistently advocate the seed industry's position for the benefit of farmers and agriculture. Through international collaborations, FSII brings best practices and propagates them amongst members and farmers for successful adoption of technology and innovation. FSII and its member companies engage closely with farmers, rural communities, regulatory authorities, policymakers, scientific community, NGOs, and other diverse stakeholders to create an enabling environment for the farmers. To help achieve the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making India self-reliant, FSII is working tirelessly to create a favorable environment to enhance the nation's agriculture economy. FSII is focused on improving farmers and consumer quality of life through improved agriculture. Join FSII's journey to empower India's millions of farmers so that billions can benefit. At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ram Kaundinya. I am the Director General of the Federation of Seed Industry of India. I heartily welcome to all of you to this very important and very timely webinar we are having on the subject of women leadership building sustainable and inclusive food systems. So firstly, my best wishes to all of you on the occasion of International Women's Day. As you know, our association is an association of research-led, research-based seed companies, seed and biotech companies in India. And we are very proud to host this panel discussion with such an eminent panel here. And we are all looking forward to listening to them. Just a few thoughts from my side before we hand it over. While half the population is consisting of women, we don't find them in the leadership positions in the same proportion for very historical reasons. And this is something which we would like to change in future. And when we talk of inclusiveness or sustainability, women are by nature more inclusive and sustainable in their approach. So I do hope that as we facilitate or as we support more and more women coming into leadership positions, the sustainability and inclusiveness will get a boost. So at both production and consumption level of food, they are involved. India has more than 14% of land ownership by women, and also more than 33% of farmers are women. So at the production side, and of course at the food side, food end of it, we all know that they play a very important role in nutrition and food. But I want to mention a few sentences about the role of men, because I think we have all women today in the panel. And as the only male member here, it is also my responsibility to say that men have a huge role to play in making sure that women get all the support to actually achieve those things which they are capable of achieving. I think starting from home, at work, in the public space, and everywhere, I think we have to see that more and more women are supported to get into economic activity in general, and in food and in the food systems in particular. I think this calls for a huge mindset change among men. And because the way we bring up men, the way we bring up our sons has to change also to some extent. I think this is something on which I would like to emphasize, that this has to be cultivated from childhood. And this is a very dire need for us to achieve things in the future. FAO's report, The State of Food and Agriculture 2010, says that women farmers can produce 20 to 30% higher yields than men. Now, this is a huge, piece of statistics, which can be of great relevance to us when we talk of feminization of agriculture. I think we have to keep that in mind, that there are certain things that women can do very well. They can do better than men. I think we should actually make them responsible for some of those leadership positions, and they should become automatic choices in some of those things. So I don't want to take more time because we have such an eminent panel here. As like all of you, I am also very eager to listen to their pearls of wisdom, which we will be harvesting today. And I am really looking forward to that. So thank you all for joining us today on behalf of our association. Of course, there will be a formal vote of thanks in the end, but I would like to thank all the eminent panelists who have joined us today. And I'm also looking forward to all of you enjoying this session and also taking away some very important outputs or takeouts from this session. Thank you very much. And now I hand it over to Ratna to take it.
Thank you very much, sir. I completely agree with you. It's a privilege to host such a distinguished panel of women leaders today. All three of them have brought their vision and leadership into a sector where women have always been there, but they've been accepted only in supportive roles. A leadership position has not been handed to them so easily in agriculture. So our first speaker, Dr. Usha Zair, is the director and CTO of MICO. She received her PhD from the University of Illinois and is the director of Barwale Foundation. She's also a board member of Donald Danforth Plant Science Center and Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. Dr. Usha has been leading the company's biotechnological efforts for the benefit of smallholder farmers both in Asia and Africa. Our second speaker, Dr. Purvi Mehta, is the head of Asia for Agriculture at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She studied in India, Japan, and North Carolina State University, and has been part of CGIR as the head of Asia for the International Livestock Research Institute, and also as head South Asia Biosafety Program IFPRI USAID. She's an honorary professor at Amity University, as well as the visiting scientist at Cornell. She's also part of the board in several organizations, including World Food Prize, International Alliance for Ecology and Health in Canada, and International Center for Rural Agriculture in Netherlands. She too, as Dr. Usha, brings forward a blend of her Asia and African experience to this discussion. Our third speaker, Dr. Marianne Sayoc, is a public affairs lead of East West Seed International. She's currently the president of Philippine Seed Industry Association and past president of APSA. She has been elected to the board of International Seed Federation and sits in various other committees. Dr. Sayoc is active both in local and international seed sector. So thank you, ladies, for being here. And without much ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Usha. Please, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ratna, and thank you, Ram and FSII, for inviting me to be on this panel this morning. Good morning, everyone who has joined the discussion today. I was a little bit confused as to what exactly I was supposed to cover, so I have put together a blend of a little bit of talking and 2-3 slides towards the end of my presentation to talk a little bit about I guess in part my journey, and then what I see as the key challenges which we face and how we tackle them. Starting with my foray into agriculture, as many of you know, some of you may not know that I was born in agriculture, right? So I was born in seed sector. I was very fortunate to have a mother who believed in education and a father who believed in science, and that science could do anything for smallholder farmers and change their lives. So as you can imagine, my journey in agriculture has always focused around science, innovation, technology, and how we can bring these to bear for the smallholder farmers. Now, Ram has already talked about the involvement of women in agriculture, and rightly, very few women are seen in the leadership roles in agriculture. And I think this is one of the things maybe during the Q&A we can pick up as to what is it that we do to mentor young women in careers in agriculture, not just careers in the laboratory sciences, but in all disciplines of agriculture. I will focus my remarks mostly around how sustainability and climate crisis that we are in is central to what we need to be looking at today from an innovation perspective. And like I said, I've always been in science and innovation and technology, bringing those to smallholder farmers. And I firmly believe that innovation is really key as we look at changing the way we do agriculture, so we are climate ready as we look at the future. By training, I'm a biotechnologist, and I guess Bolgard cotton is one crop which many people will relate to, and BT brinjal is another one which has come out of our programs in Mexico. Now, as we think about biotechnology, that is, of course, one aspect of biotechnology where a lot of women are engaged. So if we see historically, we, in India at least, and which is quite different in Philippines, and maybe Marianne will cover some of it, that we see very few plant breeders, women who are out in the field doing research. But we see a majority of lab-focused activities where women are very much engaged. So I guess there is a little bit of a cultural element to how the society at large defines roles for women in agriculture in our context. So when I think about biotechnology and the tools that have come about as a result of it and what it means for sustainability and climate, I think there are so many solutions that we are not applying today due to various reasons, but definitely the tools which are available need to be applied for smallholder farmer benefit, because the technology tools are not only crop neutral to a certain extent, they are size neutral. In the sense of smallholder farmers versus large farmers, but they're also gender neutral. And in some cases, actually, they have a greater positive impact on the female laborers who are engaged in agriculture. So when we think about these tools, I think it's very, very important to realize the positive impact that these tools can have on women in agriculture. So as I look at my journey, starting off as a scientist, then moving on to how we apply these tools, and then becoming more of a hands-off researcher, so more managing research overall, and that's what has been my journey. And it's a topic which I feel each of the young women who are entering agriculture need to decide for themselves as to what they see. Some would, of course, prefer to remain in science or in laboratories or in the field, and others may aspire for these different leadership positions. So these are some of the things that we need to look at. One thing that we have learned with experience is that all disciplines of agriculture sciences are actually interconnected, and that we have to look at solutions which encompass many of these disciplines within agriculture sciences to actually find a viable solution. And as we think about sustainability and the solutions, a few examples which come to mind for me is that nutrient use efficiency, for instance, what implications does it have? And we have science, we have tools available which we can deploy. We can develop new plant varieties which are early maturing for heat tolerance or for drought tolerance. We have molecular breeding tools which are being deployed, but not at scale, to be able to develop a product faster. And of course, abiotic stresses as we look at climate is a critical area that we need to focus on. And again, we have tools available, science available to be able to address that. I really won't talk too much about GMOs, but I feel that it is something that I want to mention because there is a significant role which needs to be played when we talk about technology for smallholder farmers and need for all technologies for smallholder farmers. So GMOs, of course, we've been talking for a long time, but now we are in good discussion on gene-edited products. And there are many, many products which are ready to go. They have significant benefits for the smallholder farmers in mitigating climate change, bringing about regenerative agricultural adoption, practice adoption. But a key element in this is that we need a facilitating and timely regulatory framework, which is absolutely critical so that India is not left behind. The ongoing crisis in Ukraine again brings to front our food security challenge. That is, if supply from one of the larger producers of wheat and sunflower oil is disrupted, then India may be able to sustain what is required domestically, but the price impact will be felt globally. And women and children in this kind of scenario where we see a price increase are the ones who can least afford these kinds of spikes in prices, will be the ones who will be most impacted. Let me briefly discuss one of our new initiatives, which is around, again, focused around sustainability. And it is something that we have been working on in one of our new initiatives. So let me go to that here. I hope you can see my screen. Okay. So this is an initiative that we have started, which is under a new AgTech was started by Mahiko in partnership. It's called Grow Indigo. And it's focused on doing agriculture differently. I'm going to talk about one of its activities, which is around a carbon marketplace. This is a first of its kind marketplace in India, which focuses on smallholder farmers doing commercial agriculture, not forestry. And so by doing, so what are the challenges? Agriculture is seen as a problem in many times, but actually I would like to share with you and hope you take home that message that agriculture actually is a solution to one of the challenges that we face. As we know that 14 to 16% of the greenhouse gases come from agriculture, and agricultural practices, if not done sustainably in a regenerative manner, lead to fertility, water quality issues. There are consequences in terms of farmers' health and also incomes of the farmers. So what the solution that we have, that Grow Indigo is bringing forward with a pilot in Punjab and Haryana, is to look at regenerative agricultural practices which actually reduce the impact of the greenhouse gases coming from agriculture. And when these greenhouse gases, gas emission reductions are quantified as carbon dioxide equivalents and converted into carbon credits, the farmer is actually not just farming the rice crop or wheat crop, but will also be doing a carbon farming. So there's an additional revenue source. So what are these practices which, and these are just, of course, a very small handful of practices that have been put here to illustrate. So if you go from transplanted rice to direct seeded rice, if you go from regular tillage to no-till or low-till practice, crop diversification by crop rotation, reduction in fertilizer usage, by introduction of biological products which can substitute some of the chemical fertilizers we use, and so on and so forth. And how exactly we go about this program is we enroll farmers in the program. Farmers adopt one of these practices. These are then monitored and verified. The program is actually registered with a IPCC recognized body, certification body, similar to what many of us would be familiar, like an ISO quality standard. And so, and at the end of the day, of course, the farmer is paid based on how many carbon credits that they have generated. The benefits of these are listed below in terms of over time, we will see enhanced yields, reduced energy use, input cost savings, soil health improvement, and water quality as well as water quantity, which is impacted as a result of following these practices. So this is what I was saying, that agriculture actually has the potential to be one of the most promising solutions to the climate crisis that we face. Because soil is a natural carbon sink. So how do we encourage more carbon sequestration in addition to the greenhouse gas reduction? So new protocols which have come now, which I will discuss briefly, actually allow for us to do quantification of the greenhouse gas emission as well as sequestration in the soil. And we see that agriculture, of course, occupies such a large area, and farmers can actually get income by doing these regenerative agricultural practices. Also, we are all familiar with all the commitments which are being made by countries, companies, and all types of actors in the industry in terms of their carbon neutrality goals. So the demand for carbon credit is there, and are willing to pay for carbon credits which are generated. And carbon credits generated by smallholder farmers also have a significant social spillover impact in terms of, let's say, more women are engaged in these regenerative agricultural practices, a reduction in drudgery of work for women, let's say in the rice ecosystem. These are all some examples which we can use to show the spillover social benefits, which further enhances the carbon credit price. So the question is, why now? Why are we discussing carbon marketplace now? So as I mentioned, there is a new protocol which has been approved recently, which allows a little bit more flexibility in terms of how carbon credit is calculated, not just carbon sequestration, but also greenhouse gas emissions. There is the carbon marketplaces are evolving, and there is by doing this and the awareness which is there around carbon neutrality now, that we feel that we can really create an opportunity for smallholder farmers for a parallel stream of income. So what we expect from this is a sustainable approach to agriculture, see a yield enhancement, reduce cost of production, market opportunities, and new sources of income. So I will, I think I will stop there just to say that this is an opportunity which creates income for farmers, but also reduces drudgery in case of rice ecosystem for women from a transplanting perspective, from greater income perspective. And we're very excited about the program to be deploying it in a commercial agriculture setting. So I once again want to thank FSII for inviting me here for this opportunity, and look forward to the question answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot. So, Mr. Konya, just a question. Do we have some questions right now for Dr. Usha, or can we just come back later?
If you have time, maybe you can take a couple of questions, but not more.
Debbie?
Yes, Ratna.
Can we take a few questions? Do we have time?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, ma'am, as the first question that I have for you is regarding how can seed industry create awareness among women farmers about the need of transgenics and women becoming decision makers? This question is by Dr. P.J. Kulkarni.
Very challenging question, PJ, but I think as industry and also association, we have taken a lot of activities around outreach and creating on-field demonstrations around what benefits technology, transgenics, or I would say even now, talking about gene-edited products which will come. How do we demonstrate? Because demonstrating the product performance in terms of what value is being created, and bringing forth the challenges which is misinformation around safety of the products. I think so that is something that we are constantly working on to highlight how biotech products are the most tested products in the history of agriculture, with safe use for the last 25 plus years. So these are some efforts. I think one key element that I would like to put here is that see, the last biotech product that India approved was in 2006. And I think for the industry to push forward with greater vigor in outreach along this line would require that there is facilitating environment for bringing new products as well. And that really will help reaching out to more women farmers as well as general population.
There's another question on the same lines by Dr. Syed Abbas. He says, we need to start a comprehensive campaign for safety features in agriculture practices, especially for women, specifically for pesticides and fertilizers used in agriculture. So do you think sustainability and safety specifically for women can be taken up by corporates?
No, absolutely. I think we are, and just building on the previous question as well, to share how the efforts in terms of communication go, and speaking from my own experience, when we were looking at BT Brinjal launch, for instance, I think I had 52 press conferences across the country to talk about the biosafety biosafety of the product, how the product was developed. And this included, of course, field demos and visits along with news and media at that point of time. So which included women farmers. But as we all know, the system, the way it works today, it has been more focused on, because typically for demos and all, people travel a few hours from different places to visit the demo, and women are very few who are there. So Mahiko, I know we've been focused on trying to include at least one day during our demos to invite only women farmer and share with them what activities we are doing, how they work, why different products perform the way they do, and how best to manage the crops. So I'm in some ways, women in many of the farming households are also decision makers behind closed doors. And if that is the situation, that having information reach them. And I think one thing that I didn't talk about, but another element which is now coming into play, is the digital media and the information which should also be permeating through that media to women women who are participating in the farming system. And this is something that we are doing from our input marketplace perspective, and we see some traction along that line as well.
Thank you, ma'am. There's one question by Dr. Tanushree Kaul regarding the input of corporates in saving the soil. I think you gave quite a good example of Grow Indigo. But is Indian market ready for carbon credits today, or when do you expect it to be ready?
So the carbon credits are, can be generated at any time, right? So as long as you are adopting one of the additional regenerative agriculture practices, the carbon credit can be quantified, and then you have a certificate that you've generated this carbon credit. Now, I know a number of companies within India who have also declared their carbon neutrality goals by whether it is 2030, 2050, or country as a whole, which is declared. So the demand for carbon credit for sure is there. And but I would also say that the pricing of carbon credit is something that we have to also look at, so that we get the best price for the farmer for the carbon credit which is generated. And so we may have to look globally in addition to Indian buyers, but also look globally to set a high benchmark, because you don't want to sell the carbon credit at throwaway prices after all the hard work which the farmers have put in. And so that is how I see the market as a all-inclusive market, global market, where the demand for carbon credit today is much higher than the carbon credits which are actually available, and especially coming from smallholder farming systems.
Thank you. We'll stop right now, but we'll come back in the Q&A section again, ma'am. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Mehta. Dr. Mehta, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ratna, and thanks to the Federation, and thanks everyone for organizing this very, very important event. And happy Women's Day to all the women in the audience, and picking up from what Dr. Kandanya said, happy Women's Day to all the men in the audience as well. So great to be here. I want to pick up from where Dr. Barwale left in terms of, the women farmers. I want to focus on that stakeholder, which plays a very important role in the food systems. And by the way, I really appreciate the title which talks about women's leadership role in the food system and not just agriculture. I think food system is way beyond just agriculture or crop production system. So I really appreciate this, especially coming from a seed federation. I think, it's all about the system, right? A system that includes the entire, say, for example, the input system, right? The second would be the cultivation system. And when we talk about the cultivation system, it's not just about the crop cultivation, but it is also about a very important sector, which is part of, especially in India, a part of the cultivation system, which is the livestock system. As many of you know, 83% of India's milk, for example, does not come from livestock farmers. It comes from farmers who are crop farmers and also keep a livestock as a diversification strategy. So that kind of a mixed system is what I want to emphasize when we talk about the cultivation system. The third is the market system and where the produce is sold and the decisions on that. And of course, the fourth would be the ultimate destination of the food system or the value chain, which is which is of course food, the consumer, and also the food's ultimate outcome, which is nutrition. So I think this entire thing from input to cultivation to market to the tables or the consumer and nutrition is what we call it as the food system. And women play a very crucial role in this entire value chain, more in some parts of the value chain and relatively less in some. So, for example, if you see production, right, they say that about 43% of India's agriculture work generally is done by women. Which is almost half of India's agriculture work is done by women. But if you see some subsectors, like, for example, livestock, over 70% of India's livestock work is done by women. If one sees the input purchase, which was the first part of the value chain, right? And I think for this audience, this is also very important. They say close to 12%, okay, of the recognized client of input purchase are women. And I know this is a slightly controversial number, but I'll come to why it is coming to only 12%. And then, of course, the market participation. Within market participation, also one sees a lot of differences. Say, for example, the key crops as we categorize them, the staples, cotton, sugarcane, those kind of things. It's about 20% of the market participation, actually slightly less than 20% is women. But when you see diversified commodities, which is especially vegetables and so forth, the women's market participation in the produces that come from diversified commodity actually goes higher, which is close to about 50%. But in livestock, and also predominantly because of the cooperatives, because of those aggregations and so forth, in livestock, especially dairy, women's market participation is at about 60%. So when you say market participation, there are again differences in places where women have less comparative advantage at the moment and places where women play a more major role. I think two more data points to support this, and then I'll move to the why. There are two very interesting data points, which is one is that 15% of women farmer are the ones who get access to any traditional extension service, right? So only about 15% of the women farmers get access to traditional, and by traditional I mean non-digital, right? Predominantly extension services. So whether it is the KVKs or any of those kind of things. And the very, very important fundamental factor in bringing this inequality is the ownership of land. Only less than 10% of India's land is actually owned by women. So I think those two play a very, very major role in some of the data. Dr. Kondania, you also spoke about the FAO data of 23% higher and things like that. I think these are some of the very fundamental issues of inequality. And the fundamental inequalities in terms of women's access lies in access to land, access to knowledge, access to market, and access to technology. And so land, for example, typically because the land is not in the woman's name, they end up working in their father's land and then the husband's land and then the son's land without really being called the landowner, and often hence not being called as a farmer. So for example, any of the government records and all that, they would not, although we all know from an industry perspective also, we know that they take some major decisions on cropping cycles and so forth, but the land may not be in the. Now, women's, I won't say inability, because I think India's laws are really very good laws which give access to land to women. So there is nothing wrong with the laws, I believe, but it is more of a social factor, and the women don't end up being landlords or landowners. So there is a lot that has been talked about in terms of women's lack of land ownership. But one thing as agriculture people we will also have to be very mindful of is not just land but soil. We have global data from Africa, Latin America, and Asia, especially South Asia, that the soil quality often of the women-owned agriculture land is also very low. It's also because they often end up getting low quality soils, right? So it's not just about how much land a person owns and what, but it is also what kind of soil, because that's ultimately going to be very important for their productivity, right? The second was, of course, access to knowledge. Both the digital extension services that Usha mentioned. I mean, worldwide, they say that about 313 million fewer women own a mobile phone. So a woman's ability to own a mobile phone is also less. But even in the traditional extension systems, and sometimes it can be very simple things, like, for example, in couple of states, what we saw is, the extension, the workshop that were being done by KVKs, for example, they typically were being held at 10 a.m. in the morning, and then they would, go on till lunchtime, they feed lunch, and then the workshop comes to an end. These are very, very important knowledge dissemination workshops, right? The women's participation were very, very little. Just by shifting the 10 a.m. timing, 10 a.m. is when they would have maximum work in the house and of the cattle and everything else. Just by shifting that timing from 10 a.m. to 12:30, the women's participation went up by about 30%. So there, sometimes it is just the question of some very simple tweaks and basically having that cognizance of inclusion. Inequality in markets is something I find as a fundamental challenge in terms of price realization. We know that women often, when a man goes to sell and a woman goes to sell, a woman's price realization capacity is often less, and that also percolates down to her ability to reinvest in agriculture and so forth. So I think that market accessibility is going to be very, very important, and I think digital can, of course, and continues to play a very important role. I get fascinated to see some of these things like, women selling their goats in Bihar on OLX like platforms. The way the markets are emerging with the digital technology and so forth. And access to technology, absolutely. I think Usha mentioned some of that, but I also would like to say some of the very basic technologies, say, for example, mechanization in agriculture, right? The index of mechanization when a woman farms is way, way too low. And therefore, again, some of the technological advancements like sharing of the tractor, or one can call it Uber tractor, or any of those things also would be very, very important. But again, to re-emphasize what I said earlier, the opportunity also lies much higher in the diversified commodities, where some of these technologies can play a very important role. And then, again, in technology also, sometimes it can be very, very simple. I remember in some of the programs in Gujarat and Maharashtra, the way the flower market works is the women typically, and 90% of them would be women, have to pluck flowers 4 o'clock in the morning from the farm, and then they pluck the flowers, and by 5:30 they have to supply it to the vendor who typically takes it to the temple and so forth. These are the main the flower buyers. 4 o'clock in the morning, it is very dark, and while they pluck the flowers, there is a lot of wastage that happens because they pluck the wrong bud, and just by simple giving them little lights that they can wear on their heads, it's almost like the miner's light, the productivity of those women went up by 23%. So sometimes technology doesn't only have to be very blue sky one, but sometimes it can be very, very simple fixes. Just to a few key solutions, I think, lies in, number one is in better recognizing their roles in terms of, let's not just define a farmer by the land that the person owns, but let's define a farmer by the produce that person brings to the market. And that perhaps will bring in a lot of equality. Livestock sector, as I said, holds a lot of opportunity. But the third one is, of course, something that this country has been doing more and more lately, which is the aggregation, right? And building on some of the large aggregation models that we've had, like the SHG or the cooperatives and so forth. And I really appreciated, Mr. Kondania, your recent article on the FPOs. I think, giving them agency, collectivizing, and basically offering that economy of scale is where a lot of these solutions lie. My third point, I wanted to almost sort of a recommendation would be market incentive. We do have a lot of these policies where, say, for example, if a woman's name is added to buying of a property in urban India, there is some tax benefit, those kind of things. Can we not try that for procurement of agriculture produces, for example, right? So I think there are several of that, and Usha has already mentioned. So I just want to say that some of these steps will be increasingly important in light of course, feminization of agriculture and men moving more and more to off-farm jobs, but at the same time, climate, where we know from global data that a woman's dependency on natural resources, a woman farmer's dependency on natural resources is always higher. And therefore, their vulnerability towards climate-related risk is also higher. And therefore, I think it becomes increasingly important. And at the end, while reiterating women's inclusion in food system, I also want to sort of make myself clear and re-emphasize that anything we do needs to be with the right balance. Women's empowerment should not come at the cost of men farmers' sustenance in farming. And I think that real balance is very important, because 86% of India's men farmer also are smallholder farmer, and they struggle with no less problems, right? So I think there has to be the right balance, and my, sort of tempted to, because there are a lot of women and young women in this audience, has told university people and all that. One thing I would give as a advice, as a fellow citizen and nothing else, is equality also means real equality. So never use your being a woman as a crutch and ask for any special favors. I think, let's really play the game equal. But overall, I think the issues need to be handled like we handle a bird. Don't press it too hard that it dies, and don't keep it too loose that it slips through our hands and flies away. So thank you. Thanks, Ratna.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mehta. And you're right. If you want a level playing field, if you want it to be fair, you have to be fair too. It just can't be a one-way road, definitely. So I have a few questions. One is from Dr. Babita Chaudhary and another one is from Dr. Alma Sentinelaire. Both of them are very similar, that what can we do to make women stronger in their decision-taking power, empower them, especially in the food system and agriculture?
I think the key area would be income from agriculture. I think, as a woman has better access to market, and when a woman, in very simple terms, makes more profitability out of agriculture, the empowerment percolates down. So I think number one is economic empowerment and getting more income out of agriculture, so her decisions of being able to reinvest into agriculture and everything can be strengthened. And the second would be education. And by education, I would not just mean the traditional primary, secondary, PhD, whatever. I would by education, I also mean a real good access to knowledge, both from a production side in the food system and also post-production side, which is how best to market the produce.
Another question from this, as you said, incentivizing things would help, but how do we incentivize women for sustainability part? This is from Dr. Bindu Nishad.
Yeah, I think, again, Usha has covered some of that, right? Sustainability and, talking about climate adaptation, climate mitigation, some of the technology use and all that does not only have to be good for environment, it also can be good for the household's economics. And so, so basically any of the climate related or the sustainability work does not have to be just nice to do, but it also can be profitable to do. And so when those two things are combined, and when climate mitigation adaptation is not just done as a social activity, but also done with keeping the economics in mind, I think people do adapt to it.
Dr. Thelma has a question on this line only. Do you think women can actually drive sustainability in agriculture?
Again, this can be controversial. Some women will not like it, but sustainability is a huge issue, and it's not just only women who can or who should be driving. I think it is a human problem, and whether it is men or women, we have to collectively work together. I'm sorry, I'm not one of those who would say women can solve everything, or I'm also not one of those who would say men can solve everything. I think it has to be a combined effort.
No, thank you very much for that perspective. Thanks a lot. We'll come back to you with more questions as audience go on with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Marianne. Ma'am, can you share your screen now?
Okay, thank you. Let me do that. For a while. Oh. Let me try that again. Always, I did it. Share screen, women. Oh, I think I lost the. I opened it earlier. The Bharati, can you please share it for me? Sorry about that.
We can do that, ma'am. No issues.
Yes, thank you. So while waiting, let me first thank FSII, Dr. Ram and Dr. Shivendra for inviting me to this webinar. It's very timely as today is it's a happy International Women's Day. So as Dr. Mehta said, happy Women's Day to both women and men in the audience. And I am actually privileged to share the stage with two accomplished women leaders in agriculture, Dr. Usha and Dr. Mehta. Dr. Usha has talked about the science on sustainability, and Dr. Mehta talked about women farmers and how their important role in food system transformation. So I would like to focus my talk on women filling the leadership gap in agriculture. May I have the slides, please?
1 minute, ma'am. We're doing it. Yes.
Yeah. We were having a dry run and it was perfect, but now the presentation was lost. But at any rate, let me just, okay, here it comes. Thank you. Okay. So can we put it on presentation mode, please? Okay, thank you. So I will talk mostly on women filling the leadership gap in agriculture. Next slide, please. This was already said. Globally, women comprise 43% of the agricultural labor force, and even ranging from up to 50% in South and Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Despite this significant global presence, women holding leadership positions in agriculture is limited. Women are involved in agriculture but underrepresented in leadership capacities. As Dr. Ram mentioned earlier, they are more on the supporting role. Next slide, please. A 2015 survey done by Ag Careers on gender roles and equality in agribusiness showed that there is a significantly higher percentage of men in a president CEO role, director and management positions. Slide 3, please. Next slide, please. In agriculture, 80% of both men and women felt that the attitude toward women in agribusiness had changed for the better in the past decade. But more than 70% of women still feel outnumbered by men in agribusiness. Next slide. When discussing the careers of women leaders, there is always a referral to the term glass ceiling, which describes the invisible barrier to advancement that women often face when they are up for promotion to the highest levels of an organization. A gender-biased thinking is that executive leadership is a man's world and is not accepting of the additional challenges presented to women who commonly are referred to as the main caregivers of the family. Next slide, please. But this perception was debunked by recent studies which found that outcomes related to COVID-19, including number of cases and deaths, were systematically better in countries led by women, such as Germany, Iceland, Norway, Finland, New Zealand, and Taiwan. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the vulnerability of our food system. Next slide, please. Transforming our food system is central to our efforts of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030 And SDG 5 puts emphasis on achieving gender equality and empower women and girls. Next slide, please. A sustainable and inclusive food system highlights the contributions of women in the value chain. This was also highlighted by Dr. Mehta, from production or cultivation, harvesting, processing, retail and distribution up to consumption. And Dr. Usha said that, you know, it even starts now with variety development, plant breeding. And let me just share with you that at East West Seed, 10 out of 12 plant breeders in the Philippines are women. And key functions in R&D, resource management, plant pathology, seed production, HR, and communications are held by women. However, women in leadership roles in a traditional male-dominated field such as agriculture are seldom properly recognized for their successes. Next slide, please. Managerial roles are male-dominant, leading towards male traits such as success means lean, mean, aggressive, and competitive. On the other hand, women are more associated with transformational leadership, which hinges on feminine traits of kindness, compassion, empathy, warmth, nurturing, gentleness, and humility. Next slide. Now, what are the barriers to women's equitable participation and leadership? First, the masculine culture. Think male, think manager is the predominant view of leadership roles. Next is the gender bias. Executive leadership is a man's world. So gender bias in the workplace limits women's success. Next is work and family issues. People think that women's primary responsibility is family, children, and home, rightfully so. Then lack of education and experience. So limited access of girls to education. And I think Usha also mentioned this, mentoring is very important, but there is an utter lack of women mentors. Next slide, please. Now, the Global Gender Gap Report of 2020 measured 156 countries on their progress towards gender parity in 4 dimensions: economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. The Philippines ranked 16 among 153 countries. This was, I think, when the first Global Gender Gap Report came out, we were ranked even higher, 8, but we slipped down because the participation in the political field has also decreased. Next slide, please. Now, how do we close the gap? First, education. This was also mentioned by our 2 previous speakers. Education is the key to unlock the potential of women. And let me draw your attention to an old African proverb. If you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate a nation. Remember who taught us our first ABCs? Who was our first teacher? No, our mother, right? Next is promoting diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace. There should be a conscious effort on the part of companies to hire more women in technical and managerial positions. Women should have equal opportunities when it comes to promotions and equal pay for equal work. Next is strong support from the family, spouse, and community. Very important. Like Dr. Ram said, the man also plays an important role. in making women successful in their chosen fields. Successful women attribute their part of their success to a supportive husband and family. They always say behind a man's success is a woman, but now you can also say behind a woman's success is a man. Next is providing access to resources, land, finance, market, credit. And according to an FAO report, providing women better access to these resources will lift 150 million people out of hunger. Next is representation in organizations and policy-making bodies at the local and national levels will give women the opportunity to influence policies and programs that will benefit women. Next, policies and legislation that empower women create awareness about the important role of women in nation building. Now, let me share with you some landmark legislation in the Philippines upholding the rights of women. Next slide, please. First is the Republic Act 7192. It's an act promoting the integration of women as full and equal partners of men in development and nation building. The act allocates 5% to 30% of overseas development assistance to gender and development. Gender and development focal points in every government agency, including local and government units, is provided for in this act. Next slide, please. The other landmark legislation is the Magna Carta of Women. It's a comprehensive women's human rights law that seeks to eliminate discrimination through the recognition, protection, fulfillment, and promotion of the rights of Filipino women, especially those in the marginalized sector of society. It also calls for increasing the number of women in third-level positions in government to achieve a 50-50 gender balance within the next 5 years. Also, non-discrimination in employment in the field of military, police, and other similar services. Next slide, please. Provision for the law also provides for equal access and elimination of discrimination in education, scholarships, and training, equal status given to men and women on the titling of the land, and issuance of stewardship contracts and patents. The gender and development budget calls for at least 5% of the government's agencies or local government's total appropriations be spent on programs to develop women. And then the expanded maternity leave to 105 days. And I think at least 184 countries also offer this maternity leave, to enable women, especially working women, to take care of their families and of the baby before going back to work. Next slide, please. I would like to end the short talk, with two quotes from two strong women. First is from Angelina Jolie, an actress and humanitarian. She said that there is no greater pillar of stability than a strong, free, and educated woman. And there is no more inspiring role model than a man who respects and cherishes women and champions their leadership. Very true. Next slide, please. And also this quote from Sheryl Sandberg, CEO of Facebook. In the future, there will be no female leaders. There will just be leaders. So I end this short talk on this note. And again, thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marianne. I have one or two questions for you before we start with the questions for all of you. The one being, when women have limited decision-making ability or power within a household, they tend to accept lower wages. the parity in their wages. So how can we change that?
I think thank you for the question. I think it all starts with within the family, within the home. If mothers would be able to empower their daughters, at a young age, I think they will grow up, being empowered. I can say this because I grew up in a family of we're five. I only have one brother, and there are four of us sisters. And the way we were brought up is that we should be, of course, a very good education, and also being able to stand up for our rights. So it all starts in the home, actually, and then you carry this out, until up. Yes.
Right. Thank you. Another one is occupational segregation and discrimination in the rural labor markets is quite rampant for women. So what are the ways we can improve this along the supply chain where involvement of women can benefit not only the sector but themselves also?
Yeah. Well, as Dr. Mehta said, the women are heavily involved, especially even from the whole value chain, from production up to consumption. I think giving them more access, better access to these resources will actually empower them and help them improve, or even improve productivity and provide more for their families. And like extension services, if these extension services will be carried out in a more women-friendly manner, I think this will help the women in agriculture achieve more.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, ma'am. Now I'll open the floor for questions for all three of our leaders. Please, audience, please feel free to add more questions. I'll start with the ones I already have received. So this maybe it'll be more for Dr. Mehta and Dr. Usha. India doesn't focus too much on gender equality. So what can be done for this? This is from Dr. Meena Kumari. Dr. Mehta?
Let the first speaker go first.
Okay.
Purvi may actually have a better answer to this than me, but I feel that India does have significant provisions in place for equality, gender equality. In some ways, I mean, we have the most doctors, we have, at certain levels, but then that equality doesn't filter down to all levels of society. And what is it that, and the previous question about labor wages, so we have different labor wages which are defined for women than for men in agriculture sector, for instance. So there needs to be greater emphasis, and education is one element of it which is there. But starting at a young age in terms of how we teach about gender equality, and then policies which enforce that would be a way to go.
If I may just add, sorry,
please go ahead.
Please go ahead.
No, please
I
go
don't
ahead.
want to. No. I was about to say that it's more a social issue than a legal issue. I think we have all the laws in place, but we still, as a society, we have to change. I think that is where the real challenge lies. That how do we create ecosystem which encourages women to get out of their drudgery at home and on the farm or whatever. I think we need technological improvements to simplify work. We need social processes to liberate them from those bondages. We need mindset change, like I said in the beginning, of men and even other women. many times even other women have to cooperate that for a woman to come out and take her share and part in the economic activity for which she is capable of doing. So those are a few comments. Please, Purvi, please go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Yeah.
No, thank you. And I completely agree with both of you on the comments. It's less of a legal issue. It's more of a social issue. And it is not only about the society in general, but I can say this and get by it. Ram, you can't say this, but I can. It is also a woman's own perception about her own work. I think it's time we don't constantly wait for somebody to come and reform things for us. It is time that and the empowerment, very interestingly, does not come from economic backgrounds or urban-rural divide. I frankly, I'm fortunate enough to be in a job where I meet and interact with some of the topmost women of the world. And I also interact and learn from the women farmers in smallest states of India, for example, right? And I often feel, and I say this with a lot of confidence, I often feel that sometimes a woman in Jharkhand, for example, who handles her entire farm on her own and her entire family takes every decision on her own, is much more empowered than supposedly, quote unquote, a very rich woman sitting in a very urban setup. So empowerment and economic thing is not. I mean, I really feel that that whole perception has to be a woman's perception as well.
There's another question on similar lines, that in India, the agriculture value chain is very male dominated. So what can women in their leadership role do to make this value chain more gender sensitive? Dr. Mehta, yeah.
So, I mean, various things, right? But the simple thing, for example, if you see the huge difference, right? Weeding in the farm is predominantly for generations has been a woman's job, right? If you see the design of a typical weeder, the one which is held with a hand, that design of a typical weeder has not changed at least in 280 years. If you look at the archaeological data and things like that, it has not changed. The design has remained the same, right? But if you see the design of a tractor, they say that every 13 months, the design of a tractor, there is a tweak that happens. Something or other gets changed, right? It gets improvised, it gets... so I think there's those basic kind of things as to the tools and technologies and the access that a woman uses. I think we need much more cognizance towards making her her profession, because it is a profession for her, her profession much more easier and bringing that ease of doing business for her. So that is very important. And one more thing I would add to the general education and social education and all that, which is very, very important. But I would also add, bringing in more gender sensitivity in, say, for example, the way agriculture university curriculums are taught as well. Because, and I am a product of an, Indian science college. When we talk about agriculture, when we talk about farmer, we only talk about a farmer with visualizing a men farmer space, and I think that needs to change, and that needs to be brought in squarely within the curriculum, not just by teaching one of the classes which happens to be on gender, but I think just making that as a cross-cutting thing within the curriculums.
Dr. Usha?
Nothing further to add, Ratna. I think Purvi has covered it.
Okay. Dr. Marianne?
Yeah, I think Dr. Mehta covered it, but maybe I will say something quite radical. I think for women to be more involved in the value chain, I think the men should also share in the household chores. So they have more time for women will have more time for these entrepreneurial activities.
Oh,
thank you.
I completely agree. This is something what Mr. Condony also said, that unless you empower them in the household, they tend to accept, less than the best when they move out. They tend to do that quite a lot. So this one, I think, is more for Dr. Usha. Given the setback in the new technology in India, like GM and everything, it has been difficult to motivate students to opt for the field of agriculture. So how can this scenario be changed? How can we motivate, being in the sector, that students take up this career option?
No, absolutely. It's a very relevant and important question for all of us to ponder upon. So one of the things that I was saying is that we need to think about education and education of food systems and agriculture from a very young age. We don't really talk about it at an early stage. But people are school going children are very interested in talking about good food, nutritive food, and so forth. So there is interest, but our curriculum really doesn't focus on creating this awareness. In the cities, for instance, we go and you ask a general question as to where food comes from. It comes from the grocery store, right? It comes from the kirana shop or whatever it is. So I think this awareness at a young age is very much required to build that basic interest in where our food comes from, number one. Secondly, I think it is very critical that we look at technology which benefits smallholder farmers in terms of production, in terms of nutritional value of the food that is produced and how it gets processed and goes to the consumer at the end of it. So if we look at that and what are the regulations, what are the policies which have to be in place, because without that, beyond a certain point, you wouldn't get that traction, because you have to be able to see some professional opportunity for growth for you to be able to engage in that field. And because of the hindrances that we've had, there has been a reduction. I don't want to beat around the bush and say, no, everything is going as it was. So clearly the research efforts in certain areas have been impacted. So I think policy is very important, but the basic education in food systems need to begin at a young age.
Thank you, ma'am. This is a question for Dr. Marianne. Can you compare the women in agriculture in the various countries in the Asia Pacific? You've been involved in the Asia Pacific region for such a long time. Do you think some nations are doing better or have improved over the years, supporting their women in agriculture?
Okay, thank you. I think in my interactions with the women in agriculture in the international organizations, women are doing very well now from practically across the, from many countries around the world. I think women in these leadership positions right now, they're doing very well. But I think more attention should be given to women, women farmers, and also women in the lower level, of the say corporate ladder. Then they should be given more opportunities. But in all my interactions, I am very impressed with the way the women leaders are doing actually.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Mehta, women in the region, they're doing well?
I mean, it depends upon what you're comparing it with, right? I mean, if you in many ways, we've done really very well. And in many ways, we have been stagnant. So yes, we do have stories of, women's participation in the Air Force and, the number of pilots that has increased. I mean, we all read today's newspaper, if nothing else, right? That is full of these kind of data. So yes, absolutely. This is also a region which has had maximum number of women political leaders, right? South Asia, especially Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India, all of. So in many ways, yes, right? But again, in some of these rural issues and all that, again, there has been a lot of progress, but there are certain issues we can't say that has been solved. So I think it's a mixed answer.
Dr. Usha, your comments?
I totally agree that that we are making progress in some fields. It's always been more equal, but in the rural areas, as we look at, and I see a direct link to women's success with education. That to me is a critical element. Again, sorry to sound like a broken record, but the more educated the women are, or allowed to go to school, then the better their opportunities and possibilities that they have. And in the rural areas, we have a long way to go. I still feel, while we are making progress, but a significant road to travel yet.
And I think I can add, Ratna, I think we need some good systematic analysis of what has worked. Diagnosing the problem is one thing, but what are the key levers that has worked, right? Education, has it worked? And the number of girls participating into rural schools, for example, that number definitely has gone up, very, very significantly. So what are the key elements that has played a pivotal role, and therefore what should we do more of is something that we need to document, including, say, for example, aggregation, if that's, so what are the key tools? Let's just analyze them and double down on that.
Totally agree. But the diversity India has, like some tools have worked in some region and somewhere it hasn't. That's another key that we have to deal with every day almost. So
just to add to that, Ratna, a very important element is around quality of education. And I think this is something, because we claim all these numbers in terms of girls going to school and so forth, but the quality of education is the second element, which is absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm. And may I say something? I talked about legislation policies, but the more important thing is the implementation. The laws may be there, but monitoring and implementation of what is written, it is really very important. And everyone should at least be aware and raise the red flag if these things are not being implemented the way it should be.
And thank you, ma'am. And that's where the social system comes into place. Again, we go back to the household. That's where we all start all over again. So thank you very much. We're kind of going towards our closing, but I request, one comment, from each of the panelists saying regarding where do they see their role, in helping out younger women in their careers in this particular industry. Dr. Marianne?
Thank you, Ratna. I think I would be very happy to mentor young women in agriculture. I would love to mentor them and give talks and be and as much as possible inspire them, but that they can actually be successful in a male-dominated world like agriculture.
Thank you. Dr. Mehta?
Could definitely do more. I'd like to sort of continue to have some kind of a say and seat in the policy discussions to constantly bring this issue of inclusion of women.
Absolutely. Very important. Dr. Usha?
One of the things which I feel very close to is living by example. And I think how we conduct ourselves and how we that is a strong message that goes out to anyone we interact with. So outside of formal, so as I talked earlier, education at an early age is something which I feel is an important element that I would like to do. But then again, showing that we are capable of doing all of these things, I think is the best way we can go forward.
Absolutely, showing by example, definitely. Thank you very much. I'll request Mr. Kondinia to give his comments on the discussion today. Yeah.
Sorry, I've just moved out of the comfort of my house, so there may be a lot of noise. But so, firstly, thank you all. There will be a formal vote of thanks, but I just want to thank on my personal behalf. We all have understood the need, and we always understood the need. But I think we discussed some good possibilities and opportunities for making this happen. Agriculture is a tough sector to really bring about this change. It's not easy because we deal with many rural dynamics. And but I think I am very confident that in the next 20 years, we will see a much significant rise in the participation of women in or what we can call as feminization of agriculture, including the supply chain. And as Dr. Mehta mentioned, the end-to-end, the entire food system. It is not just the production system, but up to the end, including the value chain and the actual consumption patterns. You know, SDG number 12, which deals with responsible production and responsible consumption, is an area where, like I said earlier, women play a significant role currently only at one end of it, which is the consumption part. But I think we can improve their participation, and we should work for their greater contributions through leadership of people like those who are on the panel today, to improve the contributions of women at the production system and in the supply chain and the entire value chain systems. I think we should. I'm very sure digital technology will be of a great help, because I'm saying that in 20 years from today, because of the role that digital will play, and also the role that biotechnology will play, I think all these technologies will help us to leapfrog. That is what I am looking forward to. And all these leaders who are with us today, as they continue to contribute, as they contribute to lead, as they contribute to inspire other women to come forward and participate in this whole journey, it will be great. I am very hopeful that this will be a very bright future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. I'll now request Dr. Bajaj to formally thank the panel. Thank you. Dr. Bajaj?
Can you hear me now, Ratna?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I apologize in advance for the internet at our office right now is a little bit playing, so I may not be very clear. But it has been a great privilege to propose this vote of thanks. We had exceptional speakers. Dr. Usha Barwale Zehar is known for her leadership in agriculture, especially in biotechnology across India. Dr. Purvi Mehta, she spoke about the social issues, and Dr. Marianne Sayoc, she spoke about the differentiation, I would say, between the leadership roles among men and women. I think without going into giving my opinion, I would just say that especially in India, I think we need to do more in terms of social structure, social fabric, to bring women forward in every field, and including agriculture. And I just give an example of an interesting discussion I had for those of us who had opportunities to travel overseas, and especially in Southeast Asian countries. We do see a lot of women involved in day-to-day life, and those colleagues who come to India, and they said to me, those women said to me that they don't see more women in India in streets, in shops, as salesperson or sales manager, or other things. So we had a good discussion among some people. One of the opinion of a person was, oh yeah, you see a lot of women in those Asian countries, and people like more busy, more we should be more protective, and that was a discussion going on. So I asked one question to those people, that if your daughter has to stay all alone by herself, you have choice of two cities, Delhi or Bangkok, which city you said? And invariably the answer was Bangkok. So I think we need to do more to increase about the social security, safety, and I think that those features will also bring women more into roles. And I'm saying, as me living in Delhi since birth, we have seen the changes, but I think we need to do more. So overall, I would like to acknowledge the time taken by the speakers to come and give their thoughts. Thank you so much. And I also like to thank Ratna, Devati, and Malika, who have given their time in preparation for this meeting, Mr. Kornia for overall guidance. And we would like to thank all participants for this meeting. I believe we have more than 200 joining in different platforms. So thank you so much. Thank you all. Have a good day. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
May I request all the speakers to please switch on their camera? I'd like to take a picture. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bajaj. Thank you, Konya sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a good session. Thank you.
Good session.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah, bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs 41% of the total population. The growing population needs food to sustain itself, and quality seed is the beginning of producing nutritious food. FSII members are engaged in research-based breeding applications and technologies to give farmers access to quality seeds. Members are driven by the fundamental values of respecting everyone's intellectual property rights and commitment to research. FSII members are leading the innovation through local in-house seed material as well as from overseas and adapting them to Indian conditions. Through seed research, seed commercialization, the members are working closely with Indian farmers to help them drive profits and bringing quality produce for consumers. FSII's prime focus is to help all stakeholders understand seed issues and consistently advocate the seed industry's position for the benefit of farmers and agriculture. Through international collaborations, FSII brings best practices and propagates them amongst members and farmers for successful adoption of technology and innovation. FSII and its member companies engage closely with farmers, rural communities, regulatory authorities, policymakers, scientific community, NGOs, and other diverse stakeholders to create an enabling environment for the farmers. To help achieve the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making India self-reliant, FSII is working tirelessly to create a favorable environment to enhance the nation's agriculture economy. FSII is focused on improving farmers and consumer quality of life through improved agriculture. Join FSII's journey to empower India's millions of farmers so that billions can benefit. At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs 41% of the total population. The growing population needs food to sustain itself, and quality seed is the beginning of producing nutritious food. FSII members are engaged in research-based breeding applications and technologies to give farmers access to quality seeds. Members are driven by the fundamental values of respecting everyone's intellectual property rights and commitment to research. FSII members are leading the innovation through local in-house seed material as well as from overseas and adapting them to Indian conditions. Through seed research, seed commercialization, the members are working closely with Indian farmers to help them drive profits and bring in quality produce for consumers. FSII's prime focus is to help all stakeholders understand seed issues and consistently advocate the seed industry's position for the benefit of farmers and agriculture. Through international collaborations, FSII brings best practices and propagates them amongst members and farmers for successful adoption of technology and innovation. FSII and its member companies engage closely with farmers, rural communities, regulatory authorities, policymakers, scientific community, NGOs, and other diverse stakeholders to create an enabling environment for the farmers. To help achieve the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making India self-reliant, FSII is working tirelessly to create a favorable environment to enhance the nation's agriculture economy. FSII is focused on improving farmers and consumer quality of life through improved agriculture. Join FSII's journey to empower India's millions of farmers so that billions can benefit. At 1.3 billion, India has the second largest population in the world, out of which the Indian agriculture sector employs 41% of the total population. The growing population needs food to sustain itself, and quality seed is the beginning of producing nutritious food. FSII members are engaged in research-based breeding applications and technologies to give farmers access to quality seeds. Members are driven by the fundamental values of respecting everyone's intellectual property rights and commitment to research. FSII members are leading the innovation through local in-house seed material as well as from overseas and adapting them to Indian conditions. Through seed research, seed commercialization, the members are working closely with Indian farmers to help them drive profits and bring in quality produce for consumers. FSII's prime focus is to help all stakeholders understand seed issues and consistently advocate the seed industry's position for the benefit of farmers and agriculture. Through international collaborations, FSII brings best practices and propagates them amongst members and farmers for successful adoption of technology and innovation. FSII and its member companies engage closely with farmers, rural communities, regulatory authorities, policymakers, scientific community, NGOs, and other diverse stakeholders to create an enabling environment for the farmers. To help achieve the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making India self-reliant, FSII is working tirelessly to create a favorable environment to enhance the nation's agriculture economy. FSII is focused on improving farmers and consumer quality of life through improved agriculture. Join FSII's journey to empower India's millions of farmers so that billions can benefit.